That's preparing live stream. Okay, got it. Boom. All right, dude, we're live.
We are ready.
Dr. J in the house.
What is up? Yeah,
what's going on,
back
brother?
again for Tenure Tuesday with my good friend and guest on his own page, Nick Cavuto. I'm going just a cheesy applause. I don't even know if it's going to come through the mic. I'm going to start to get some sound effects on this. But yeah, this is week 3 out of 4, man. This has been amazing. If you haven't seen the other interviews, there's so much gold in there. Go back. It's on Nick's personal page. Go watch those interviews because it's amazing. And I'm really flipping the script with Nick here because Nick is the man when it comes to building brands, when it comes to anything, all online. And when it comes to personal brand, I know even for myself, Nick has helped me take my brand to the masses. So I am truly thankful for Nick and everything that he's done for me. And man, you've been doing this for what, 10 years in this space? And just helping build brands and just, So, and Nick, I mean, I'm going to go through your bio again for anybody new that's watching this for the first time, because he really helps high impact entrepreneurs who are looking to make their business smarter, stronger, more successful in order to unlock their maximum impact in the world. Nick is the owner of Cavuto X, a media company where he works with passionate entrepreneurs who are committed to pushing the world forward, creating a huge impact, and being rewarded for it, because that's what it's all about. We want to serve, but on the opposite end, man, we deserve the abundant life, and Nick helps you get that. And he's a speaker. He's an entrepreneurial mentor, human potential expert who specializes in deep coaching, personal branding, and transformational leadership. Nick is known for his intuitive ability to unmute people and build relationships. He is the founder and CEO of Tenure Brands, a digital agency where he's created the personal content machine, a simple, effective way to create content, engagement with your audience in as little as 1 hour per month. He's also generated 1.5 billion digital impressions with his smarter marketing method. He's captured over 500,000 leads in multiple verticals and industries, 100 million in direct client revenue, and managed 1.3 billion in products. Nick, thank you again for allowing me to do this on your page and let people see behind the scenes with you.
Dude, yeah, man. I love you, brother. And Courtney, thank you for being here. Val, thank you for being here. I can see a bunch of you guys are on. So thank y'all. Much love. And Justin, dude, you are just best friend in the world, man. Appreciate you.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you, man. And I really want to dive in and kind of follow up from last week, because last week we touched on ROI of your why and how entrepreneurship is committed to the highest version of you. Can you say more about that? Why is it about you and your why when it comes to ROI?
Yeah, I think it boils down to intent. And it's the missing link, I think, for most people who are, in the entrepreneurial journey. There's so many things that we have to do, that we need to do, that we feel like are centered as far as the big idea of what we're supposed to do. And just yesterday, and this is what I'm looking for, just yesterday, I was taking a client through just kind of her pillars of her event. She's going to be throwing a huge event here in Denver at my venue, which is awesome. Lauren Johnson. And it's all about really helping people who are within the industry of, performance psychology, et cetera. And one of the things that I wrote down that I thought was really interesting is, this idea that influence is the new currency. And this is why it comes down to the individual. This is why personal branding is so important, is because influence is the new currency. And that happens through intent first, which a lot of times has to do with our rational ability for us to actually justify what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it, right? So it's our intent. I was coaching a guy yesterday, huge. I mean, he was a kind of second tier executive at Apple. And so, dude, it's so funny. These people come to me, I'm like, how does this happen, right?
Right.
He literally ran the entire college division in sales for purchasing Apple products for universities. Okay. We ran the whole thing at Apple. Then he worked for another company where they did reselling, where they would buy back the stuff from the college and then resell it on Amazon, refurbished and whatever. And so he did that for years. And he's like, man, I'm just feeling this higher calling to help dads. He's got 7 kids. I met him here in my neighborhood. I mentored his son when they lived here. They just recently moved to Florida. And I mean, dude, it was just this incredible conversation around like this next season of my life. I want to do it different. I'm feeling compelled that God is calling me to something greater. And I'm like, and you know, I think for folks uniquely, the sticking point is, but what makes me different? What makes me unique? Why would people listen to me? And I'm like, oh, dude. So like I go to war for people. And in the process of going to war for them, I'm actually going to war with them. Like inside, right? Like my level of belief in what's possible for them is usually far greater than what they can see in the moment. And so intent is the first thing, which has to do with our logic. Why am I doing this? The second thing boils down to intimacy, which is the EQ ability for us to understand who do we want to be around, and truly the impact that you want to make. And that's why when he said, like, I just want to help these dads, whether they're corporate executives or entrepreneurs, I cannot stop this tugging on my heart that I'm feeling. And then the last step has to do with your intuition, which is your spiritual ability. It's the tapping into something greater, which has to do with how. Your intuition tells you how. And most people waste their time in the how, trying to figure it out. And again, when it comes down to the individual, they're just in their own way. And that's the process of the unlock. That's the process of helping them get out of their own way, is truly through those pain points. Most people who I'm collaborating with, they think it's over. They're like, I don't know what to do from here. And I don't have the answers of what's next. And for me, I'm like, your limitation is not on your ability as an entrepreneur. Your limitation is on yourself. It is a self-imposed limitation on what's possible. This is why the skill set comes down to the individual. The intent comes down to the individual. The influence that's required in order for you to do your greatest work comes down to the individual. Entrepreneurship is the ultimate mirror to the person. And you have full permission. No one's holding you back. No boss is telling you no. There's nobody holding, the tow line on your revenue. It's up to you. And that's why I'm obsessed with the individual. Yeah.
Now, a lot of people have that. They have this feeling, I want to do more. I want to do something. Like for him, I want to speak to these dads, but they have those voices in their head. Who's going to listen to me? Why does my story matter? What do you say to those people? Because like you said, a lot of times as coaches, we see their ability, but they don't see it. So how do you pull that out of them?
Well, first of all, I get them to the idea that they need to stop defining themselves by their worst moment. We do that as people. We define ourselves by the loss, not the win, and that's so difficult because it is imposter syndrome comes from our intellect. It's rational thinking. And to be honest, likely true. If I look back at the last X amount of years of my life and I look back at entrepreneurship, I have a guy right now, Justin Ocello, my buddy from New York, who came in to do business operations. And he's like, bro, if you would have just, you have an S Corp, if you would have put yourself on payroll, you would have paid half in taxes this year because your owner draws are coming off of capital gains tax at 30%. My logic would say, I am a failure of a business owner. I'm irresponsible, right? Like I could go through all the things and then I could also make an excuse and say, well, I didn't know better, which is bullshit. I didn't know, but it's my responsibility to know. So in the absence of knowledge or logic, it's still your responsibility to then figure it out. So as long as you see that there's a challenge, right? So this happens across the board. I'm not a good enough dad. Why should I go coach dads when I feel like I need to be better? And in my opinion, I'm like, because it gives you accountability.
Yeah.
And he's a freaking amazing dad. I wish I was like 25% of the dad that he is, right? And so a lot of times, again, with our own lens, our own rational thinking, our process in our mind, it usually the combination is superseding based on the lack of and not the wins that we've categorized because we don't celebrate our wins enough. So I think when we define ourselves by our worst moment, we don't allow God to do what only God can do. And an unmet expectation of our ability to perform also can decrease the level of faith that we have in order to accomplish the impossible. And so for me, when I'm navigating that open space with people, I have to have the energy, the chutzpah, the endurance to outlast their excuses of why they're not enough. And that to me is like the most fun thing in the world. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I feel like I did.
No, you did. And you're so right, because we don't celebrate the wins. We could have 99 wins and one loss, and we dwell on the one loss. What happened there? What could I have done better? Oh, it's always going to be like that, versus no, look at all these wins that you've had. And then speaking of wins, I want to switch gears with you, because you've started and run several multi-million-dollar enterprises. You've faced the challenges of the startup. How do you stay true to your purpose when the going gets tough? And then you spoke on previous weeks about 5D awareness and 3D realities. So how do you use that in your business?
Yeah. What was the first question? I got the second one.
Yeah. So using the 5D and the 3D, because you've ran all these multi-million-dollar businesses, but how do you stay true to who you are when the going gets tough?
I think I have to release judgment and encourage and foster lessons learned. I remember one of my first leaders and mentors said, you can make any mistake as long as it's once. And it's like, oof, it's such a gut punch, because it's like, when you know better, then you do better. And I've had to live that out in my life. And in most areas of my life, I do make the mistake once and I learn from it and execute. The challenge is when the vortex of life comes in and then you're in the repetition mode of the same challenges. That's when, Jim Rohn says, if you're on the fence, get off it. It doesn't matter the decision that you make. So as long as you make one, because the outcome on either side is always hypothetical and theoretical. You never really know. When people are going through the midst of a divorce, let's say, they never really know, should I stay or should I go? They never really know that if they stay, that was the right thing, or if they go, that's the right thing. You just have to make a decision at some point. And I think that's part of mixed expectations for us, is like, a lot of times we expect in our lives that if we do X, Y, and Z, then we'll get X, Y, Z result. I'll go back to a biblical reference. And for those of you listening, this is my dialect. So just roll with me when I talk about things that are in a different spiritual context. Okay. Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt, which was represented as bondage and slavery. And that's what they begged and asked God for. And they sent the most unassuming leader who couldn't speak right, who couldn't say the right words, who stuttered, to go in front of the king, i.e. like a president, and be like, I'm taking all of these prisoners. Let my people go, right? And through that process, they got the promise. Then they were in the middle of the desert going like, oh God, why, we want to go back because the food was better. Here in our lives, do we ask God for a miracle? He gives us the answer, but we don't think it's the answer that we wanted. Or he gives us the answer we wanted, but then we're left in the desert after the promise. And now what? The result of a failed expectation is disappointment, but we're not God. And so we have to find ourselves in this season of trusting. This is the idea of generosity and open hands, and going like, God, this is what I desire. This is what I want. And if God gives it to us, you can't judge what happens after. It's just lessons learned. The quicker you learn the lesson, the faster you pass the test. Typically, the quicker you get to the promise. And so that's honestly for me of like how I invite, let's call it 5D reality into my world, is through meditation, through prayer, through honestly petitioning and asking God for certain things. And there's times in my life where I do it a lot. There's times in my life where I don't do it at all. And I lower my shoulder and I grind to the point of powder myself because like it's in my own will and my own strength. And as an entrepreneur, I have that very strong arm. But sometimes divinity is the answer. I don't know about you, but there's been times in my life where I've tried to solve a problem with intellect and it didn't work, and logic. I tried to solve a problem by navigating the emotional complexities of a challenge in a friendship or a marriage or in a partnership. The only thing that worked was actually like just saying, God, I need your help. At the end of 2019, I sat in the same exact room and yelled at the top of my lungs at like 2 a.m, God, what do you want from me? He said, I want you to pastor entrepreneurs. I spent a year before that trying to figure out what my fucking offer was, and I couldn't solve it. And until I invited God into the solution, and in an instant, it's almost like, God, I need resources, or God, I need this or whatever. And the check is sitting in your pocket. You just never looked. And so for me, a lot of people are grinding, pushing, trying to solve problems using their intellect, using their logic, using even their ability to persuade and communicate. But they didn't ask the one thing. God says, you don't have it because you didn't ask for it. God, what do you want from me? Immediate answer, pastor entrepreneurs. I didn't like the answer, by the way. But I said, God, fine, I'll do it. And guess what happened? 4 months later, COVID hit and I lost the entire business. That's what I'm saying is sometimes God will ask you to do things for the sake of obedience, but we don't understand the full picture yet. And so if I judge that situation and go like, well, I'm not going to trust God again because he told me to do something, I went and did it, and then it was taken away, I have no feeling, I have no association with God telling me to do something and the result or the outcome. The result of the outcome is generosity, obedience, following through. You know, if I have a divine source that will give me instruction, my God, that is a blessing in and of itself. So I'm not going to judge the outcome. I'm just going to follow the instruction.
Yeah. And I think it comes to that intuition in that spiritual realm, meditation, prayer, bringing God in, because we do too many times try to solve it on our own. And a lot of times intuition gives us the answer, but then our logic tries to talk us out of it. We try to tell all the stories of why this won't work. When like God's like, no, here, this is your answer. But this, but that. And we try to talk ourselves out of the real answer. And something you brought up when you talked about expectation, I think a lot of people have false expectations. And what we really need to do is trade our expectation for appreciation. So like the Israelites, they lost appreciation. They wanted out of slavery and bondage. They got out of there, and then things got hard and they lost the appreciation and wanted to go back. With you and in your business, you kept the appreciation factor. You lost everything, the business around you, but you still had the appreciation for what God had called you to do. And then that's the difference for you, because then you took that message and then expanded it from there. You didn't say, hey, oh, this is the end. It didn't work. Why did I ask God for that? You're like, no, I appreciate this answer and I'm going to go all in for it.
Yeah, so it's staying power, and it has to do with understanding that resistance under pressure is what creates strength.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So staying on those lines, how does getting into flow help with that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it helps with our intent. You know, when I was talking to this gentleman yesterday, you know, I told him like, I want you, here's your homework assignment. I said, go home and write, my intent is. Like, that's it. Like, we'll start there, you know, because after I got him off of the stone that he was not enough, but he was exactly who he needed to be in exactly the right season and time of his life and that of the people that he'll serve. He got that because I told him that God will always make room for his gifting, his unique ability to meet people where they're at, doesn't require a global audience. You know, he's feeling like, man, if I write a book, I got to be like John Maxwell. It's like, no, you don't. Maybe you will be, but you don't have to be. You can do it one life at a time right now. And so as soon as I was able to remove that, then I was able to get him into intention, which is starting with why, you know, not really the Simon Sinek version. I think intent for me has to do more with spirituality, because when we have clarity on our intent, we can get excited and we can get out of anxiousness and imposter syndrome and uncertainty. We can get into excitement, which is the highway to flow. So if we can, on one side, we can ensure that we're staying excited and we're pumped and we're amped because we're clear and we know what the hell we're doing. Val Brown, my executive coach, right? What did she tell me? If you don't know where you're going, any road will do. Yep. And I mean, it's been burned into my mind like that. If that's the case, that's the case, right? So when we know where we're going, now you can drive fast and have fun and enjoy the journey, because the GPS is already calculated. You already know how far you're out. You already know the destination. You already know the gas stops. Like, you already have the whole journey planned, and now you can enjoy the ride. And part of that is where there's a decrease in anxiety, because there's a certainty and there's a clarity and there's a confidence. There's an assurance of what the destination is and what the outcome will be. And so on that pathway, then the only thing you need to do is release expectation. So what's funny, like, to stay in the flow, it requires excitement and release, excitement and release. I'll give you an example of, like, if I'm going on a road trip with my kids, okay? Like, and we've done this. We did a 16-hour trip from Denver to Spokane, Washington to visit my wife's grandparents. Clarity. Okay. GPS dialed in. We know where we're going, heading up to Colbert, Washington, right? All this kind of stuff. Then we have the pathway, which is, okay, we're going to stop at these places and we got these Airbnbs and whatever. And then the release is releasing the expectation. okay, I could get a flat tire. We could have to stop at a different destination. One of the kids might have to go to the bathroom, right? Like, and if I get frustrated at each one of those steps, it's going to put me back into anxiety mode. High challenge, low skill. Oh, why about this guy? Just listen to me, right? Versus just keeping an open hand and going like, hey, if you got to go potty, maybe someone else will too. You know, hey, if we stop at this place, maybe there's a cool monument that's on the way. And so it's excitement that we're on this journey together, and the release of expectation that it needs perfection. Perfection is an ideal. It's not real. It's never part of our reality. And so many people seek it. I think more people, instead of seeking perfection, should honestly just seek proximity. How can I get closer to the people that I'm called to serve? How can I get closer to the heart of my kids? How can I get closer to that of my wife? What are those pathways of proximity versus the idea of being perfect and leveraging perfection as the ideal state? That's, to me, where everything goes sideways. So that flow state is high challenge. All right, this is gonna be a long ride. And also the skill and the energetically, like the stress responses and whatever those things may be, or the mindset that it's all good. No matter what the outcome is, it's all good. And I stay in that lane. But the ultimate to me is generosity, and which generosity I think is embedded in the idea of having a euphoric experience of like, this is the best thing ever. It's gratitude. It's being able to give without expectation of return. It's being able to enjoy the ride without, judging the bumps in the road that will come, and actually pre-planning in your mind that this will not go so as far as I see it, because whatever I see is not necessarily the reality of what will be. And so be okay with the twists and turns of the road and the uncertainty of the things in life that will happen undoubtedly, and just have full acceptance of whatever is.
Whatever is, absolutely. And that goes back to your intent and then your expectation. Because you look at the guy, if he based his expectation on John Maxwell's book numbers, then anything his book does is a failure. If it doesn't make the bestseller list, if it doesn't sell 1 million copies, he's going to look at it as a failure. But if he releases the expectation and looks at every single person that buys my book as one more life I was able to impact, that's the intent, then everything changes. And then his book becomes a vehicle.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, the book becomes a vehicle of generosity in that point, because, hey, you created this to change lives. And that's your own way to give generosity back, is what you created.
100%, man. And our why connects us to the who, not the how. So our intent always brings us to the heart of the individual that we want to serve, not the pathway in order to solve the problem, right? Now, if your intent is off, this is like people who are like, all right, I'm one funnel away. My intent is to drive a bunch of revenue and not serve a lot of people. Then you don't ask the who question, you ask the how question, which is the wrong question. The how is your intuition, which is the follow the cloud, which is so hard for most people to understand if they don't have a relationship with God or with their source, whatever. So you got to kind of take that step back and go like, intent is literally MapQuest, like inputting the numbers on where are we going. And then when we ask the question of who, the same thing that I mentioned to this gentleman was, get into the heart of the people that you want to serve. So when you're sitting out there on that porch dreaming, don't dream about how you're going to do it. Don't dream about what your book's going to say. Dream about the lives that are going to be impacted and changed on the back end of you following through on this next season of trial, of challenge, whatever it may feel like or seem like to you, of uncertainty. Think about those people. Pray for them. Ask God to show you what it is that they may be going through in their life uniquely that you're going to have an answer to. That right there, that's the stuff that changes the game big time.
Yep, absolutely. Because once you have that and you're not thinking about the what, how am I going to do this? How am I going to make it happen? It comes to you. You've seen this in your own businesses. God gives you the word, pastor entrepreneurs. Okay, I'm going to do that. Business falls apart. You could have been like, well, shit, I'm going to give it all up. Like that wasn't the right path. But no, he kept showing you the way and you kept being obedient to that. Like, no, I know, I've heard you talk about this. I know that this is my purpose. I know this is what I'm called to do. So I'm going to stay true to that. And then the what, the how, all of that took care of itself.
It does. If you focus on the who, you'll figure out the what, and then the how solves itself. And that is 100% true and has been true through and through in my life and in every expression of life that I've seen. That formula, that's the Super Bowl formula right there.
Yep, absolutely. All right, I got a two-part question for you.
Sure.
So what are some of the trends you're seeing in personal branding and marketing today? And what are some of the steps people can take so they don't get left behind?
Yeah. So let me speak to the biggest problem, which certainly illuminates the biggest opportunity. The social media is becoming very overwhelming for people. It's not just the imposter syndrome. It's not just the mindlessly scrolling, but the platforms now have existed for long enough that there's a constant spread of attention. And now people are going uniquely to different platforms for a different experience. So like Instagram is like pop culture, but then all of a sudden MTV hits, which is TikTok. And now like it's losing relevance very quickly. And so now Instagram changes their algorithm and they're like, we're no longer a photo sharing app because they want to go head to head with TikTok. And so now they're an experiential platform, right? Like, so all these things are shifting all the time. And here's the thing that I know to be true that I want everyone to just to keep in mind. Social media, especially when leveraged for business, it requires you to be social. It's a big idea, but it's very simple and foundational. And the whole reason of why we got, Facebook started to connect people who were in college. And then after that, then grandma wanted to be able to see the kids. It is a social platform, but people think that they can just sit behind the scenes and just publish, maybe even publish once a week, or some people are published every day, but then they don't actually engage with their audience. When someone comments, they don't comment back. When someone sends them a DM, they don't answer it. They have zero strategy or tactics for actually reaching out to other people as part of their communities in order to see what new relationships they can develop. I'm like, it's like going to a gala and standing in the corner by yourself and leaving and going like, well, I didn't get any new opportunities. I didn't meet any people. It's like, well, because you stood in the corner by yourself, and licking your wounds because you didn't want to engage and because you had all this stuff going on in your head and you were too busy, sitting there on your phone to actually engage with anyone.
Yep. Yeah.
So there's
this all the time. You just reminded me, like, because you do have to be social, but all the time people aren't publishing. They're not being social. And like, I'm going to invest all my money in this funnel. That's going to solve everything for me. And then the funnel, one funnel away. And then the funnel bombs and they wonder what happened. Well, it's because you weren't social to begin with. No, nobody cares about your funnel. They want to see you and get to know you, like you were just saying.
Yeah, that's the whole jam. I mean, it's the platforms are constantly evolving. There's two different types of entrepreneurs. There's a how-to-preneur, and then there's the ideapreneur. And the ideapreneurs it's like old school solution selling, like from the 80s and 90s. Like you're holistically solving problems for people. And that has boomeranged back, just like in the M&A space, buying businesses of boomers who are 65 plus, whose wives don't want their businesses, their kids don't want their businesses, and they just want to sell them and get out of them, but they don't have anyone to give it to. That whole industry has been booming over the last 6 months. Just talked to my IP attorney last night, and we were talking about that. And I know it's coming from Dan Pena and all of his YouTube activity. Isn't that interesting? That wherever the consumer attention is, the world follows. And that's as simple as one influencer getting really popular on one channel. So social requires us to be social, just like business requires us to build relationships, just like the success of any relationship has to do with ongoing communication and, having intimacy in that relationship of, checking in, how are you, how are things, right? It's the whole game of businesses, relationships. And on social, we think that it's like we can just build a funnel and walk away. And that's just not how it works. So it's old school with new school. It's turning into old school handshake, spit shake relationships. I trust you, therefore now the people in my community trust you. And then on the opposite side, it's new school where all those conversations and those interactions are happening digitally. And so I think people have just omitted the responsibility of building relationships online, and they have just succumbed to the idea that either A, they can just create daily content, or B, they can just build a funnel. You can't just publish one way and expect yourself to grow your business. You have to increase your capacity for relationships. You have to be very explicitly clear about the people that you want to work with and the problem that you solve for them. And the more that we've done this, the more that we've started seeing a lot more opportunity when it comes to like working with our ideal client. With tenure, we're in a transition point where tenure talent is going to be the next phase. I've never even talked about this yet. So this is kind of like a pseudo announcement of it, but tenure talent is moving into the public figure and personality space, essentially to be a talent management company for public figures, entrepreneurs, executives, creators, and personalities. And so the trend upward is what we saw was people would come into tenure, they get the daily content problem solved, but then they would notice like there's other things that I need to do. So what else can you guys do for me, right? And so there was this tension of like, social media requires us to be social, which is where I developed that idea, came off of the concept that like daily content solves a problem, but creates 10 more. Now we solve the engagement problem, which I think is the number one thing that everyone should be focusing on, which is engagement. So as long as you have content for someone to come back to, there's no point in going door to door and inviting people to your house. And then when you host the party, you're not home. So you got to create the content, you got to create engagement. And the engagement part is essentially content builds relationships. Relationships build trust, trust drives revenue. So it's a relational part. So now what problem does that create? Well, now I got to comment back to 15 people a day and I get 20 DMs a day. So then we got to solve that problem. So now it's ongoing communication to build the trust that's required to then, get somebody on the phone with somebody who might be interested in solving a problem for them. So for us, it's coming in like troves. It's like waves. And it's now the assessment point of like, who's the ideal person we want to work with? It goes back to the who. Isn't that interesting? Starts with the who and ends with it. What we're going to do, how we're going to do it, that all solves itself. But who we want to serve and what way we can do that the best, I think is something that's always top of mind for me. So social media requires you to be social. You got to make sure, yes, if you're creating content, great. That's step one. Step two is it's going to create more problems because you're going to see more opportunity, which then needs to be handled in your ability to develop relationships at scale.
And you brought up a question for me because a lot of people think, but I need to separate my personal Facebook page, my business, all these things. But you introduced me to a guy a while back and he was like, your personal friends list, Facebook gives you 5,000 friends. That's 5,000 potential leads. So what do you speak to? I've seen you use your personal page. We're on your personal page right now. What is the importance of using your personal page and then driving that to the business?
Yeah, well, the personal page is a reflection of you. And although Facebook, it's against their, terms and conditions to use your personal profile for business. At the same time, they want their users engaged. So they don't really care. They just are like, hey, you're not supposed to do that. They never said it to me, but I just know because I know their terms that that's one of those things. But what I realized, was that 5,000 people on my friends list could be 5,000 leads. And honestly, I believe much more in the 1,000 raving fans concept than I do anything else of like scale. It's like they're vanity metrics. So if I have 100,000 people who are following me, right, then it's like, and I get X amount of interaction and engagement, well, then how great are those numbers in true reality? If I had 100 people I was talking to, I could probably turn 80 of them into clients. And I just invest in those 100 people. So like, you got to kind of pick your tribe. And I think that's part of the reality right now of what people are facing is like that they don't have community, that they don't know how to create community because their intent is wrong. They want to build a business that serves them, and even with my employees, like I've really had to get down to the idea that like I work for them. And it's a hard thing. Like you like zoom all the way out as an entrepreneur and you're like, I went from working for someone now to working for someone. It's like, well, yeah, you're working for your family, you're working for your calling, you're working for your team, you're working for your clients, welcome to the bottom of the totem pole, but that's the idea. I mean, even as a dad, I remember my first pastor told me, he's like, even like dad is under the dog, like in the totem pole of family, because like your kids are the most important, right? Like, and then, obviously your relationship with your wife, and then there's like the dog, and then there's like, and then you get time for you, right? And it's true that like when we understand that our true mode of service is whoever we're closest in proximity with, which should start with our source, then should go to our spouse, and then should extend to our kids and all the other things in life and our audience and our clients and all of those things in our teams. You just realize you're the nucleus. So it's not that you're at the bottom of the totem pole, you're in the inside of it, right? You're not in the outer ring, you're the central core of it. And then you need to define what those relationships are that extend beyond it. But, I think that people just miss the opportunity of a quick voice memo to somebody that you feel like, that's my prospecting formula would be rejected by most sales organizations in the world, but it's the most effective, which is slow down, follow your intuition, go through your friends list. And when something pops, like, yeah, reach out to that person. You get your phone, you send them a voice memo, and you encourage them.
So good.
It breaks all the rules, yet when you know the rules, then you can break them. Influence is a new currency, right? Like, so for me, it's not manipulation tactics. It's not, sales psychology. It's being a good human being, being a good person. That always wins. It always has and it always will. Just like brand always wins. It always has and it always will. The feeling that someone gets about you when you're not in the room, and that's one of the things I think in my life that from a legacy play that I'm trying to find my pathway to sorting out a little bit more, which is like, how do I have a legacy like Tony Grebmeyer, where everyone who mentions Tony, like, oh, he's one of the most amazing people in the world. I don't have a lot of enemies, certainly, but at the same time, it's like, I want to have that reflection point of where in my life that I impact people in such a way that creates a unique experience for them that they don't forget. And that requires time, space, innovation, ingenuity, and not like stale old tactics that are self-serving. And that's why I don't ever go that route. I've had so many sales consultants tell me you are the best, worst salesperson I've ever seen in my life because you don't follow any of the rules. You don't do any of the things you're supposed to do, but you close at a higher percentage of anyone we've ever seen. And I'm like, yeah, that's because influence, intimacy, intent, that's what ends up leading to your ultimate contribution. And I know it works. So I'm with it, bro.
Yep. Yeah. And man, we could just mic drop right there because I know we're out of time anyway. So make sure you join us next week. We got part 4 with Nick here on Tenure Tuesday. And I am Dr. Justin Mosley, the Mindset Doctor. Thanks again, Nick, for doing this. Appreciate you, brother.
Of course, brother. Appreciate you, man. Thanks for the idea. Love it. We'll talk to you soon. All right, y'all. We'll see you. Bye.